You awaken at dawn, the bitter tang of dry blood clinging to your lips like a scandalous secret. The air in your ramshackle cabin feels thick with dust and dread, as though it remembers every footstep you ever made and shudders to recount them. So, before you settle in, take a moment. Rumor has it, some travelers bid you like the flicker of lantern light and subscribe to scattered gossip only if you truly savor the whispers of this hunt. They even ask you to scribble in burned pages where you're listening from and what hour it is, as though they chart their congregation of sleepless souls across the realm. Now, they say, dim your hearth's glow. Perhaps set a small fan of dried reeds to hum softly, and let us together descend into this day's uneasy journey. Your bed is a heap of scratchy blankets thrown over straw, its springs creaking under any weight, especially yours, given your years of bending under fate's cruel yoke. You sit up slowly, mind buzzing with a dozen half-remembered nightmares, witches' laughter twining with the crack of bone under your arrow's impact, charred bonfires lit by trembling villagers, faces contorted in hopeless fear as they beseech you to save them. But you are the last witch hunter, and there is no savior left here. You rise from the bed, legs trembling as though you've just escaped a noose. Every pulse in your body screams that you should have died months ago, back in the abyssal hollow, when 5 covens rose to snuff out your kind. The realization rings hollow, like a spent shell casing rolling across a cobblestone street, empty, pointless, and dangerously close to shattering. You shuffle to the grimy window, peeling back a tattered curtain to peek at the gray dawn seeping through thorn-laden branches. A pale mist drifts in from the whispering woods, curling around skeletal trees, like ghostly fingers beckoning you to return. You know better than to linger. Those woods harbor more than owls and bad memories. They cradle the witches who thirst for your blood. You grab your worn leather jerkin, slipping an arrow into its quiver with a practiced hand. Your bow, your last possession from a lifelong line of hunters, rests in its usual spot by the door. You stroke its polished yew limb, feeling the faint hum of old magic. Today is the day you hunt witches, or they hunt you. Either way, the price is a life, and the coin is desperation. You secure your blade at your hip, slender steel etched with runic sigils that once slaughtered demons, now grown dull from disuse. You cradle your father's locket in your palm, its tarnished silver warming to your skin. One half bears your mother's face, the other a rune of protection, now broken. You press it against your heart. Better a broken rune than none at all. Down the winding staircase, you enter the common room, where Father Aldwin stands by a stone hearth, its embers long cold. He greets you without surprise, his lined face shaped by too many funerals. In his palm, he holds a single parchment sealed with black wax. He passes it to you wordlessly. You break the seal and read by flickering torchlight. Brother Hunter, witches stir in Ravenhollow. They feast on the weak and fashion curses from Moonlight. By sunset, they will converge on Glenwood Keep. You are the last sanctified blade between them and the innocents. Beware the shadows, for they carry whispers of your doom. Sister Mirabelle of the Silver Veil, your heart tightens. Ravenhollow is a sprawl of decaying cottages and tangled bramble, a place where even birds avoid perching. Glenwood Keep stands further east, a fortress of gray stone and shattered hopes. If witches gather there by dusk, no one in that keep will survive. You tuck the letter into your jerkin, as Father Aldwin murmurs a blessing, lips moving so faintly you can barely catch holy words in the musty air. You step outside into the chill dawn, your breath curling in the gloom like a thief's secret. The dirt road leading to Raven Hollow stretches out, flanked by fields gone fallow under fear's dominion. At the road's edge, a crooked sign reads Ruinford, its paint peeling, letters askew, as though undecided if they want to stand or flee. You clench the hilt of your dagger for reassurance. Today, superstition is currency, faith, a forgotten coin. As you journey east, the wind stirs, carrying echoes of rustling leaves and distant laughter that curdles your stomach. Somewhere in those whispers, you catch faint giggles, no child's, but something darker, older, and laden with malice. Your senses sharpen, arrow nocked and ready. You tread lightly, though each step echoes like a cannon blast in the empty morning. 2 miles from Ruinford, you pass the ruined chapel of St. Vivian. Its roof collapsed, pews splintered, candles spent. Out front lies a lone stone idol, once painted with holy symbols, now defaced by runic slashes. A smear of blood mars its base. You swallow, remembering the last time you found that chapel intact, that pulpit echoing with hymns. Now it whispers mortal dread. You bow your head, whispering a prayer to saints you no longer trust. In the dusk of memory, you hear a voice, your mother's, urging you onward. You steel yourself, knowing that beyond this place, darkness thickens like ink. At midday, you reach Raven Hollow's outskirts, a ring of blackened cottages, roofs sagging under the weight of unspoken sin. Smoke curls from a chimney, smelling foul, like burnt flesh soaked in vinegar. You crouch behind a half-fallen wall, observing 3 cloaked figures silhouetted against the sky. Their garments flutter like vultures, tattered and unnatural. You notice each carries an odd bundle, a baby swaddled in silk, a black ram curled in a hood, and a woman's severed braid tied with blood-stained ribbon. The witches are gathering sacrifices, coating their armpits in herbs so they can vanish into shadows on command. You swallow hard as you draw an arrow to your cheek, finding your target, the closest witch, her lips moving in twisted incantation. Suddenly, behind you, a faint footstep, dry, deliberate, and accompanied by scent of burning lavender, a primal marker of witchcraft. You whirl, arrow aimed, but find no one. Your heart pounds as the rustle of leaves crescendos into murmurs. Unable to focus on one threat, you retreat deeper into fog-shrouded cottages, arrows flying blindly to keep unseen stalkers at bay. In that moment, you realize the witches hunt you as much as you hunt them. Each breath you take, each step you make, they watch you, waiting for your resolve to break. As dusk falls, you exit Raven Hollow by a hidden back road that curves north toward Glenwood Keep. The sky bleeds purple and red, heralding unnatural chaos. The silhouette of the keep's walls looms above jagged treetops. From its towers, torches burn. No welcome for a traveler. The drawbridge stands raised in warning. You advance under cover of creeping shadows, muscles taut as bowstrings. When you finally reach the keep's outer ward, crickets chirp in a steady rhythm, while walls seem to breathe, as if alive with anticipation. A lone guard, his armor covered in soot and grime, steps from a sentry post. He raises a gauntlet. No sign of recognition crosses his hollow gaze. He gestures you forward with a nod so perfunctory, it stings more than a blade. You move inside, bow lowering even as suspicion curls at your spine. The courtyard is empty, save for overturned supplies left in haste. Tables meant for feasting now lie splintered. Stools used for watching sunsets now serve as ladders to hastily barred windows. Above, webs of banners flutter like ragged bats, bearing the crest of House Fenwick, once proud lords of these lands, now host to terror unknown. You step toward the great hall's entrance, sword at the ready. A muffled chant drifts to you, a chant in a language that tastes like brimstone on a living tongue. You slip through the great doors to find a hollow room lined with flickering candles. In the center stands a monumental hearth. Its flames cast grotesque shadows on ancient tapestries depicting Fenwick's triumphs. Now, those cloths, draped like shrouds, you see, suspended above the grate, a sedan chair fashioned from bone and sinew, its occupant swathed in tattered linen and bound with copper wire. When you approach, the occupant's face shifts from childlike innocence to a snarling crone's mask. Her eyes glow with wicked hunger as she spits, "Welcome last light. Here we feast upon your fear." From the shadows, 5 witches step forward in perfect silence. Each stares at you as if you are the final act of their unholy drama. One, tall and pale, hair like moonlight on wet sand, raises her voice cracking like frost on window pane. "We have come for our hunter. The cycle must end." Roderick stands behind you, blade drawn, but falters as he beholds their power. Each witch's staff crowned with fetuses and jars, each ring carved from human bone. Your pulse thundered so loudly, it drowned out their verses. The largest crone, her skin ashen and lips bloody, broke the taut silence. "You have slain much, boy of brittle faith," she crooned, stepping closer. But now, the tables turn. The chair's occupant, once a noble Fenwick heir, whispered, "Hunt us, kill us, and still this place is ours. Our hunger surpasses death." The walls shuddered with their laughter as they encircled you. You knocked arrow, aiming at the pale witch's heart, but your hand trembled like a leaf in storm. Arrows and steel had saved you countless times, but not now. Your strength sagged under the weight of their magic. You glanced at Roderick, who nodded, a silent vow to stand with you to the end. He lunged forward, blade singing, but the ground beneath him split, swallowing him up to the waist. A chant rose. He was trapped, bound in Earth's grip, like a helpless pawn. Faced with their triumph, your fear thundered, yet a spark of defiance ignited. You drew another arrow, pressed its tip to the string. Breath held as you steeled your heart. A single shot might not kill a witch, but it might shatter the compulsion they held over minds. You let fly. The arrow flew through air, scented with brimstone and wolf bile. It struck the largest crone's staff. Shards of bone splintered and crackled, magic seizing like a wounded beast. She shrieked, stumbling backward as her cohorts wailed in response. Roderick, freed from the earth's grip, lunged, slashing at the nearest robe. The spell lifted some, and a flicker of pain crossed their faces. Proof they too were mortal. Chaos erupted. You dove for cover behind an obsidian column. Flames from the hearth roared higher as the magic binding the witches burned. Roderick, blade dripping crimson, cut down 2 of them, each letting out a final wail that shook stones. The largest crone regained her stance, staff crackling with fractured wards, and screamed, "You shall die by our hand." She raised her bony finger, unleashing a blast of wind that forced you to your knees. Your ears rang, blood roaring, your vision blurred. Yet you saw a small bronze mirror on a shelf used for divination. Desperate, you crawled, bracing each breath on your last ounce of will. Magic swirled around you, tugging at your soul. You reached for the mirror, found its edge, slick with old spittle and candle wax. You angled it toward the crone's glare. As her arcane energy shot forth, it struck the mirror's gilded surface, refracted into shards of shattered light that erupted across the hall. The witches' voices faltered as each shard pierced their hearts. Magic, repelled by a trick of reflections, the great hall fell silent, except for flickering flames and your ragged breathing. You leaned on your dagger, trembling as Roderick joined you. "It is done," he whispered, eyes red with both triumph and sorrow. "But at such cost." You knelt, folding the crone's charred remains, then extinguished the brazier's flame with a gust of breath. The shard of shattered mirror still glinted in your palm, its fractured edges reminding you that even in darkness, one gleam can shatter the blackest spell. Raven Hollow's screams faded into the night, replaced by the hush of impending dawn. You arose unsteadily, Roderick at your side, both of you staring at the carnage. The wheel of vengeance had turned. Tonight, the hunted had become the hunter. As you slipped into night's embrace, leaving behind the echoes of a final victory, and the bones of those who once vowed never to let you stand at dawn, you vowed to carry this shattered light into every shadow yet unseen. Dawn's light bled through the shattered windows of Glenwood Keep's great hall like a miscarriage of hope. Your breath came shallow and quick, each inhale tasting of ash and iron. The floor beneath your boots crunched with shards of mirror and bone, souvenirs of last night's battle. Roderick knelt by the largest puddle of cracked glass, scraping up a jagged fragment with gloved fingers. "Hold this," he murmured, his voice thick as burning embers. "Proof that even in darkness, our reflections can slay monsters." You stared at the shard until its reflective edge slit your vision. It glittered with flecks of blood and candle wax, as if mocking you for expecting something pure. The four witches lay strewn across the hall like discarded dolls, each body contorted into a grotesque parody of sleep. Their robes were charred where their magic had snapped, leaving symbols half erased by flame. One crone's severed braid lay coiled by her head, unconcerned by the horror it had wrought. You leaned close, searching her eyes for a final spark of remorse, but they stared blankly at the scorched tapestry above. The silence felt thick enough to choke on. Roderick rose, wiping mirror fragment on a scrap of cloth. "No sense lingering," he said. "They may yet have kin." You slid your dagger back into its scabbard, tasting copper on your tongue, as if the blade itself had whispered its thanks. You followed Roderick through the blood-stained corridor to the staircase, each step echoing like a latch snapping shut on last night's nightmares. When you reached the keep's outer courtyard, the dawn air was cold, the sky still bruised from twilight's tears. A crow flapped overhead, cawing at some unseen calamity. You swallowed bile. The bird might have been mocking your survival. The courtyard lay deserted, except for overturned barrels and broken benches. A broken arrow, its shaft splintered, lay by the drawbridge, once bristling with bodies of both hunter and hunted. You picked it up, tracing the fletching's charred edges. "Another artifact," you muttered. Roderick tested its weight before tossing it back to the dirt. "We gather what we can." We set out at dawn's full light to find Father Aldwin's scriptorium. Father Aldwin's scriptorium was your only hope of reversing the witch's curses. and tracking down other covens. He'd been like a father, stern, severe, but fiercely protective of arcane lore. You felt a pang at the thought of his leafy smile before the forest fire took him 2 years ago. Now, his younger cousin, Brother Cartham, held the keys to old tomes locked away behind steel and prayers. The scriptorium lay 4 leagues north in the village of Grafen, a hamlet once famed for its alabaster churches and hearty ale. You climbed onto your horse, a gaunt mare named Sparrow, its flanks heaving with exhaustion. Roderick mounted his stallion, Blackthorn, snorting clouded breath into morning's chill. You kicked Sparrow's flanks, and she lurched forward into the smudged dawn. Roderick's spurs jingled like a broken promise, and in that sound you heard the last echoes of your resolve. The road to Grafen wove between fields where war's aftermath still scorched the earth. Trees blackened like burned ribs, noxious grass curling underfoot. You guided Sparrow around a half-collapsed wagon of abandoned weapons, each pike crowned with rust, each sword hilted in cracked leather, felt like testament to 1,000 doomed victories. Your eyes flicked to Roderick, remembering his violent epiphany when the witch's smoke had seeped into his lungs. He had killed 5 in a single breath. You both carried that memory like a curse. Grafen sprawled as you approached. A cluster of thatch-roofed cottages ringed about a crooked church. Smoke drifted from chimneys like dreams of warmth. Children chased geese across dirt lanes, oblivious to recent horrors. You nudged Sparrow forward. Roderick followed, scanning shutters for signs of life. At the scriptorium's door, a heavy oaken frame, bound with black iron, stood Brother Cartham, eyes widened at your arrival. His robes were stained with ink and sweat, hair in disarray. "You are alive," he said with a rasp. "I feared the Covens claimed you." You dismounted, dropping to one knee. "We broke their sway," you said, voice rough. "But their sisters may hunt us yet." Roderick entered behind you, sword at the ready. Inside, the scriptorium was a cool hush. Tall bookcases lined walls, shelves sagging under leather-bound tomes, aged by neglect. Dust motes danced in beams of light, slicing through high windows. Cartham led you to a long table strewn with manuscripts. "Here lie pages of redoubt and ruin," he said, shuffling parchment. "Father Aldwin compiled everything known of witchcraft. Marks, rituals, weaknesses, before Corbin's rebellion." You traced your finger along a passage of rune-laced script, instructions for forging a mirror that could shatter witchery. It matched the fragment still clutched in Roderick's gloved hand. "Your shard," Cartham whispered, eyes shining. "From that mirror, one may divine the Coven's links." You snapped a scroll shut, tucking it into your satchel. "We need to know who remains," you said, "and where they clandestinely plot." Cartham's brow furrowed. "Rumor says there's a nest of witches in Blackwater Fen, just beyond the marsh. They traffic in the souls of children, shape net and storm, whisper wrong names in the dark to bind men's wills." Then he handed you an iron key. "These doors hold hundreds of spells. Use them not lightly." As he spoke, footsteps echoed in the cloister outside. An old maidservant scuttled in, eyes bloodshot. "Mask your voices," she hissed. "They come even now." Roderick unsheathed mercy. You pressed a finger to your lips as Cartham grabbed a lantern. They moved to the windows, peering down the lane. Through the glass, you saw 4 cloaked figures approaching, staffs topped with polished black stones. Their stride bore purpose, as though the air bent to their will. I will lead a decoy, Cartham said, shaking his head. Go north to Blackwater with haste. Before you could protest, he slipped out a back door. The maidservant bolted the front doors with trembling hands. The witches reached the scriptorium's entrance, snarls visible under cowl shadow. You exchanged a nod with Roderick before entering a hidden alcove behind a stack of vellum baskets. You drew arrow and bow, heart pounding in lockstep with distant chants. The door rattled as Cartham's voice boomed from the courtyard. You hunt for old pages? Then I shall deliver them, along with myself. A witch hissed, bring him to us. We have no hunger for the remaining mirror. Then the front doors burst inward, and a shower of broken wood erupted into the musty air. You shot arrow. It struck a witch's hip, eliciting a strangled cry. Roderick emerged from the shadows, felling a second with Mercy's edge. The third seized Cartham's back as he darted inside, chanting in desperation. The clank of steel and rasp of spellbooks mingled. You loosed another arrow, embedding it in the third's staff. The staff exploded in a pulse of green light that sent all three witches sprawling. You must escape, Cartham shouted, blood pooling in his robes. Go now, before they rise. Roderick sheathed his blade, and with you, plunged through a hidden passage behind the altar, one well known only to the keep's devout. The secret corridor's stones wept moisture, as though even they mourned the knowledge contained within. You stumbled out into the night air, Cartham's screams echoing behind you as the scriptorium's doors smoldered. By the time you reached the stable, the witch's howls had faded into the forest's clamorous hush. You mounted Sparrow as Roderick hoisted his sword. Cartham's keys and scrolls lay in your bag, heavy with promise. To Blackwater Fen, you ordered, and Sparrow bolted down the lane in one fluid motion, neck straining at the reins. Roderick followed, Blackthorn's hooves thudding like a funeral drum. By the time dawn broke, you reached the edge of Blackwater Fen, a sea of reeds and murk. Half-hidden cairns jutted like broken promises. A thin mist hovered, swallowing shapes. You dismounted, stepping onto a decaying wooden plank over reeds that writhed like serpents. Each planked step threatened to collapse, but you pressed on, banner of faith propelling you forward. The witches had fortunes in Fen's depths, but so did your swords and your hatred. Through the narrowing path of planks, you glimpsed a cluster of cabins built on stilts above the mire. Smoke curled from chimneys in sickly spirals, as though poisoning the sky. Roderick raised his hand to halt you. This is the nest, he whispered. Bloodstone willows. The name tasted like bile, each syllable charging the air with dread. You drew your bow, feeling each arrow strap as a vow of vengeance. Together, you waded across the last broken plank, stepping into dark wood doorways where children's cries echoed in wrong tongues. Beneath windows glazed with darkness, a single ember flickered, possibly a bound child's heart. You exchanged tense glances. Your blood pounded, time dripped away, and the final hunt began. Rain pattered on the rotting shingles of the Bloodstone Inn, like nails hammered into Hope's coffin. The inn's sign, a gnarled hand clutching a ruby, swung in the wind, creaking out a dirge for lost souls. Roderick and you pressed against its rotting door, drawn by whispered promises that witches gathered there, breeding their darkness in the guise of hospitality. Inside, the hearth's embers glowed weakly under piles of black ash, as though hell itself had grown too tired to ignite. You scanned the low-ceilinged common room. Long wooden tables, smeared with old gravy stains, benches rotted through at the supports, and puddles of stagnant water pooling beneath the walls. A single lantern swung from a crooked beam, casting shifting shadows that played tricks on your eyes. 4 figures sat at a corner table, gaunt, hollow-eyed, clothed in tatters. Their lips moved in tongues you recognized from Cartham's scrolls, guttural incantations drawn from esoteric dialects used to shape nightmares. One of them, a man with skin stretched tight over his cheekbones, glanced up as you entered, revealing eyes like polished obsidian. "Witch hunters," he hissed, voice laced with ice. "Come to taste our hospitality?" He spread lightning-scarred palms in invitation. Roderick stepped forward, blade at the ready. "Where are the children you enslave in witchcraft's name?" His voice was steel wrapped in velvet, enough to still the inn's rancid air. The 4 swallowed, exchanging looks of feverish calculation. Then they cackled, a sound that split the hearth's frail warmth in half. "Children," the first rasped. "We feed on their innocence. Their whispers bind the Bloodstone's power." He raised a small glass jar containing a pale child's hand, no bigger than a doll's, pulped into unnatural preservation. The sight sickened you, each finger joint twisted like the branches of the Bloodstone willows. "They speak of your doom," he said, lifting the jar for you to gaze upon. Anger flared in your chest like a brand struck against steel. "Release them," you roared, voice like a hammer, "or taste the end of barbarism." He tossed the jar onto the floor. It shattered, spilling murk across broken floorboards. The 4 witches rose as one, staffs crackling with dark energy. Roderick lunged, slicing at one's leg. The man's lanky form crumpled, but from the wound, he uttered a curse that rippled through your bones, filling you with nausea. You swayed, vision blurring, until Roderick's hand slapped your cheek, snatching you back to awareness. Above, the roof groaned as though protesting. An unseen force slammed doors open, and 3 more witches streamed in, faces wreathed in twisted smiles. "You cannot change fate," the leader intoned, stepping forward so close. You felt her breath, sour as decay. "The Bloodstone demands a sacrifice." Your last shred of hope. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the trade of steel and sorcery. Roderick ducked under a slash of oil-cast leadstone, striking back with mercy's edge. Sparks danced as blade met staff. You, recovering from the curse's sting, loosed arrow after arrow, each one arcing toward robed figures with mad ticker tape design. One bolt caught a witch in the chest. She twisted, toppling into a table soaked with spilled ale. The mug shattered, ale foaming like pus. She screamed, vanishing in a flare of crimson sparks, her scream echoing like a call to war. Your second arrow found its mark in another staff, splintering it in a shower of wood and bone. The witch fell to one knee, a cry of agony bursting free as shards of magic fled her. Roderick leapt forward, plunging mercy into her heart. She toppled, eyes wide with betrayal. You surged toward the inn's darkened rear corridor, where moans cut through shadows. Pushing past a trap door, you found a small cell. 3 children huddled together, eyes rimmed in terror. You knelt and offered your canteen. They took gulps, tears mingling with filthy water. "You'll live," you whispered. One child blinked, green eyes reflecting flickering lantern rays, and nodded as though his soul hung on that single promise. Behind you, the inn's roar reached a crescendo, wings of fire, doom spells twisting through walls. You grabbed each child's hand, leading them out, as Roderick held the door against the tide of witchcraft's final onslaught. Arrows and blades danced in the embrace of flames and curses. Roderick emerged, eyes blazing beneath a blood-stained brow. He reeled, chest heaving, but held the doorway just long enough. You slammed the trapdoor shut as Witch's claws scraped wood overhead. The roof's beams groaned, collapsing inward with thunderous crack. You, Roderick, and the children bolted out the back door, feet slipping on wet cobblestone. The inn's walls shuddered, flames pouring through windows that danced with wicked delight. You didn't look back as the roof caved in, burying the witches in a cacophony of splintering timbers and monstrous shrieks. The Bloodstone Inn had demanded its tribute and paid it in scorched flesh and shattered spells. You emerged into the choking smoke, Roderick's hand tight on your shoulder. The back alley stank of burning wood and old curses. To the river, you gasped, roughly guiding the children toward the mist-shrouded bank that lay a stone's throw away. You and Roderick knelt, lifting the children into small fishing boats tied to a broken dock. The river's current gurgled like an old warning, but you shoved off anyway, paddling into the swirling fog. Behind you, the inn's silhouette collapsed into ruins, marked only by howling ghosts, carried away on the wind. As sunrise rose over Raven Hollow's skyline, you set the children down at the gates of a nearby convent, Sister Mirabelle of the Silver Veil's refuge for orphans and outcasts of witchcraft's wrath. She greeted them with arms wide, as if to swallow their nightmares and replace them with hope's soft embrace. You gave her Cartham's scrolls and the shard of broken mirror. Use these to protect children from horrors unseen, you said, voice cracking as you handed over the cursed mirror, shard and parchment. Sister Mirabelle pressed your hands to her lips, blessing you with a chant that hummed in your bones like a lullaby. As you and Roderick turned away, the children's cries hushed into the convent's quiet hush, safe, for a moment, from shadows of wicked intent. Roderick raised his gaze to the river's mouth, where mist drifted like pale warnings. They will hunt us still, he said, rubbing the mirror shard between his thumb and forefinger. But we have struck at the heart of their blood-soaked revelry. You nodded, eyes stinging with both relief and regret. There were more covens to be found, more curses to unweave. Today's victory was fleeting. Tomorrow, the hunt would continue. You mounted Sparrow once more, as dawn's reluctant light warmed your spine. Roderick climbed onto Blackthorn, mercy sheathed once again. Without a word, you turned back toward the whispering woods, where the next coven waited. As the convent's gates swung closed, you heard Sister Mirabelle's final words drift across the water. Remember, hope is stronger than fear when it's shared. You stared at the rising sun, tasting its promise on your tongue like wine. In that glimmer of dawn, you knew the road ahead was long, lined with shadows and curses. Yet now, for the first time in many nights, you carried in your heart a single ember of hope that refused to die. Horse hooves beat the dirt road like funeral drums as you left Silver Vale's sanctuary behind. Roderick and Sparrow forging a path through forest twisted by a witch's hand. Trees here bent strangely toward one another, their branches intertwining like gnarled fingers in silent conspiracy. A blooded hush wrapped the woods in menace, broken only by the caw of ravens perched on crooked limbs. They watched, unblinking, as you passed, black-eyed heralds of something ancient and hungry. Roderick carried Mercy in one hand, its edge catching moonlight that lingered despite dawn's advance. You guided Sparrow between dense undergrowth until the path widened beneath a grove of bloodstone willows. Their leaves, once rumored to bleed upon injury, now dripped with blackened rain from last night's storm. Occasionally, a single crimson leaf floated down, like a tear at memory's door. The ravens swooped low, their cries echoing like accusations. One settled silently on Roderick's shoulder, head cocked in terrible curiosity. "Won't perch on me," Roderick said, voice low. "Knows blood of slain witches." He held Mercy's hilt, as though expecting it to shudder. The bird's gaze stuck to him like a curse. You gripped bow more tightly, summoning every lesson learned from 1,000 hunts. Read the wind, trust your instincts, name your prey. Today, you hunted the widow witch, rumored to roam these parts after her husband and child vanished in a plague 2 decades past. Grief twisted her mind into black magic's embrace. Now, she traded curses in exchange for Mercy's bones. You pressed on until you reached a small clearing where a clay hut crouched beside a smoking hearth. Hens pecked at the ground, oblivious to sorrow. A thin plume of smoke wreathed the roof, algae darkening its thatch. You dismounted, the earth's heartbeat throbbing in your ears. Roderick sniffed the air. He tasted something acrid, like burned honey. You slid arrow to string, knocking it with slow precision. Silence fell heavy as the sun's rays filtered through dripping willows. Then a voice hissed like a serpent disturbed. "You come again, knife-thirsty fool?" The widow witch emerged from the hut's door, hair white as bone dust, skin browned by sorrow and regret. Her eyes burned with a raven's intensity, pupils flaring to pitch void. She lifted a gnarled staff, carved with runes that glowed like faint embers. "You slay my sisters, yet leave me wretched plague bird's rage." Roderick stepped forward, boots creaking on sodden ground. "Your coven fell last night. The Bloodstone Inn's collapse silenced their sorcery." He raised Mercy. The widow witch's lips curled into a tremulous grin. "Then you stand at the well's edge, looking to drown. But I taste your breath, fear mixed with steel." She waved her staff, and the hens scattered into frantic flight, their shrieks piercing as a blade's twist. You loosed the arrow, aiming for her staff's gem. It soared, slicing air with deadly hush. But she flicked her wrist. Staff deflected arrow, which embedded into a willow's trunk. Bark snapped. Moisture sprayed. You hopped back. Shards of arrow flew like cursed rain. She laughed, a sound like glass breaking in slow motion. "Hunter's pride will be your ruin." She stomped ground. Willows hunched. Roots snaked out, curling around your boots like serpents. You kicked Sparrow's flank. The mare whinnied, stamping. Roots tightened, drawing you toward Witch's hearth. Roderick lunged forward, cleaving a root with Mercy. A spurt of blood welled from its oak flesh as it recoiled, but other roots rushed in to replace it. You slashed left, arrow in right hand. But the quarry seemed endless. The widow witch raised her arms, chanting in a voice that scratched like tattered vellum. Bile rose in your throat as reality shifted, shifting air into a darkness where willows towered like condemned sentinels. Roderick gasped as a phantom figure flickered in corner of your vision. A child's laughter, your child whose soul the witches devoured. The memory clawed at you, ripping your grip on blade. Suddenly, a raven screeched overhead. plummeting toward the witch's staff. It swooped in a perfect arc, striking the gem with sharpened clavicle. The staff shattered, magic backfiring in a burst of light and fetid smoke. The widow witch collapsed, clutching her chest as runes faded into ash. The willow's roots receded, releasing you and Roderick from their grip. You stumbled forward, pressing a boot to her neck. Her eyes filled with rage and regret, tears mixed with blood on her ashen cheek. "End it," Roderick hissed, blade at her throat. "Let this agony end." The witch attempted a final chant, but no sound came. Her lips moved, but you recognized the words, plea for mercy, that no god would hear. You closed your eyes, caught in the moment where mercy and vengeance collided. Then you thrust mercy through her heart, the blade's edge slicing through sorrow and malice alike. She exhaled once, blood pooling like dark petals as her gaze softened, no longer predatory, but resigned. You lifted your blade from her chest, wiping its edge on her cloak, as though cleansing a mirror shattered 1,000 times. Roderick sheathed mercy with a soft clang. The widow's body crumpled, turning to dust upon the earth beneath the oak's roots. The raven that shattered the witch's staff landed on her chest, cooing like a reluctant herald. It hopped away, its black eyes reflecting the grim dawn in mirrored sorrow. Together, you and Roderick trudged back through the fen's dissipating fog, reaching the road where Sparrow stood, committing herself to your touch as if grateful to carry you both from that scene. As you mounted, you felt the widow witch's gaze linger in your mind, an echo of grief and madness, whispering that every slayer inherits the beasts they destroy. You pressed boot to flank. The mare lumbered forward. Roderick followed, each step tracing the path of a smoke and shadow you had left behind. By midday, you returned to Grafin, where Brother Cartham awaited with fresh parchments. He looked pale, eyes sunken further than yesterday. "You have succeeded," he whispered. Yet the Coven's tendrils spread like brambles. Another nest stirs in Blackscale Village, where infants vanish and toad-eyed witches grow at midnight. He handed you a map, its edges singed, revealing a cluster of runes in the swamp's heart. "Go quickly. No time to rest." You and Roderick shared a nod and a grim smile, the kind only those who have faced impossible horrors can share. You rode out, the sun dipping as you neared a trail leading to Blackscale Village, a hamlet where the river's bend grew foul, its reeds blackened. Each step on the trail felt like crossing a threshold into a nightmare. As dusk froze, the sky in charcoal silence, you reached the outskirts of Blackscale Village. No smoke curled from chimneys here. No laughter reached your ears. Doors hung open, their hinges aching with abandonment. Windows lay like empty sockets. Glass shattered. The stench of rot twisted in the air. Rotting fish, rotting hopes. You guided Sparrow through narrow lanes, Roderick beside you, with Mercy's hum echoing in your bones. At the center of the village, a stone, well gaped like a pit into hell. 3 witches stood around its rim. One held a dead infant, swaddled in silk, now stained by creek mud. One stirred a cauldron filled with fetid water and broken glass. The third, a widow with spider legs for arms, had eyes sunk deep in skull, promising hunger unbounded. A chorus of cries rose from the well's depths. 4 children clutched to the stone's edges, faces streaked with fear. They clung to life by trembling hands as the widow witch chanted in a tongue that bent light into coils of dread. Roderick raised mercy. To reduce their power, you reminded yourself. You drew arrow, aiming for the swinging staff. It sailed true, snapping the witch's arm back with a crack that sounded like a thunderclap. She shrieked, hurling water from her cauldron that hissed on cobblestone. The cauldron's contents bubbled with unnatural life, soaked shards that slithered toward you like serpents. Roderick leapt, Mercy's blade humming. Sparks flew as steel met staff again and again. You loosed arrow after arrow into the three, striking one in the heart, pinning another to the well's edge. Water sluiced from the well, white-faced children dangling until Roderick slashed their bonds free. He pulled them out, one by one, each child's sob echoing like a plea for mercy. As he cradled the final one, the third witch, her ebony wings unfurled, rose from the well's bottom, claws gleaming like obsidian. You turned to face her, heart pounding. Her grin widened, revealing fangs that dripped with ichor. You raised your bow's final arrow, stepping backward to maintain distance. She advanced, each step a ripple in the well's water. The moonlight gleamed off her malformed wings. "You think your blade can save them?" she hissed, her voice thick as oil. "Children's souls feast our power. Sever that tether, and you starve us from the inside out." Her logic unraveled in your mind as Roderick slashed at her wing. You loosed arrow. It struck her wing, burning flame where iron met flesh. She howled and beat her wings, stirring a gale that snuffed torches and scattered embers. Children screamed as water surged from the well, hungry to swallow anything that moved. You charged in unison with Roderick, each step a rebellion against fear. Mercy's edge danced as you hacked at her tendrils that writhed like sea snakes. Each cut bled cursed ichor, vaporizing into puffs of sulphurous smoke. She wailed, stumbling backward, her wings shriveled like scorched leaves. Finally, you both lunged, twin blades descending. She convulsed, her body convulsing into a mass of black ichor and rotting sinew. With a final, rasping breath, she collapsed, melting into a pool of foul water that hissed as it sizzled on the torchlit stones. The remaining two witches lay crumpled on the ground, their robes smoldering. With faltering steps, you and Roderick dragged the four children away from the well's brink, each one clinging to life with desperate persistence. As they ran back toward safety, the well's water receded into darkness, leaving only slick stones that glistened like dark teeth. Crows descended, cawing as though marking territory, witnesses to your final conquest. You and Roderick remained, hoods drawn against the river's chill. "Another nest undone," Roderick said, voice rough with exhaustion. He wiped Mercy's edge on his cloak. Its blade gleamed cold as a tombstone. You nodded. "We must rest now. Our quarry grows wiser." He turned, eyes drifting over mists. "But in our rest, they search us still." The ravens above scattered, their cries lingering like a dirge. By the time you rode under the ruby glow of a blood moon, the air itself felt thick with portent. Sparrows' hooves drummed against a narrow path wrapping around the moors, a road so seldom traveled that moss claimed its stones. Roderick followed on Blackthorn, both of you laden with the weight of children's whispered thanks and the broken bones of last night's horrors. Now, you hunted a final coven, 5 witches known as the Sisters of the Crumbling Spire, rumored to convene at an abandoned tower called Witch's End, where the land's grief pooled like stagnant water. The tower rose as a silhouette against moonlit sky, its spire half-toppled, stones blackened as though ravaged by hellfire. A low wind blew across the moors, carrying sounds like children wailing, a lamentation borrowed from realms beyond. You leapt from Sparrow, drawing bow. Roderick dismounted, settling Mercy's hilt against his shoulder. You approached Witch's End, lantern held low to avoid attracting attention. The tower's iron gate sagged on broken hinges, revealing an entrance draped in cobwebs and knotted vines. Inside, moonlight filtered through shattered windows, painting ghostly patterns on cracked walls. Signs of habitation lingered, a circle of salt etched into the floor with scorched candles at each point, torn parchment scrawled with arcane symbols, sprigs of nightshade drying like sacrifices against a tattered tapestry. You moved like a wraith, each breath counted, each heartbeat a drum summoning phantoms. A deep hum vibrated in the stones, growing louder as you descended a trapdoor into the tower's dungeons. The walls here bore chipped runes, their glow pulsing faintly like dying embers. You turned a corner and froze. 5 cloaked figures knelt around a pentagram carved into the floor, each chanting in hushed unison. Between them, a bound man hung upside down from a rusted chain, rope burning his wrists. His face twisted in terror and pain, mouth gagged with ragged cloth. Roderick stepped forward, blade gleaming in lantern's tremor. "Release him," he commanded. The witches glanced at each other, their eyes devoid of mercy. One, pale as a raven's wing, rose, voice smoldering. "You come to halt our blood moon rite. Too late. We drink the hunter's essence as sacrifice. Tonight, we rise anew." The chain rattled. The man's eyes rolled with desperation as his captors chanted. You lunged, arrow flying toward first witch, who lashed out with a slender dagger. It deflected the arrow's tip, sending it ricocheting off the wall. The second witch strolled forward, her hand tracing curses in the air. You dropped to one knee, knocking another arrow. Roderick attacked the first, steel clashing with dagger in a shower of sparks. The third witch, old as ruin, raised her hands, conjuring wisps of inky smoke that coalesced into phantom children, wailing. Their cries roiled the darkness until it pulsed like living water. You aimed, but the ghosts melted before your arrow reached them. One drifted through you, chilling flesh. You staggered, but held firm. Drawing blade, Roderick fought fiercely, each strike severing her flimsy garment, only to reveal new, enchanted mesh that shimmered like a cursed tapestry. The fourth witch approached the bound man, drawing razor at his throat to complete the sacrifice. You charged, thrusting dagger between her ribs. She wailed, stepping backward as her flesh knit behind the steel. Crimson pooled at her feet. She collapsed into the pentagram, her body convulsing under the weight of her own spell. The chain snapped, and the man fell to the floor with a grunt, eyes wide as he gasped in sweet relief. The fifth witch, tall and regal, face veiled, raised staff high. You meddle in forces beyond your merciful grasp. Your soul's prize is death. She slashed staff downward, summoning a pulse of silver light that blasted you backward, jarred ribs splitting with pain. Gasping for breath, you picked yourself up, gritting teeth. Roderick fought the second witch, his blade slicing enchantments. She toppled as moss spilled from her wounds. Blood pooled on the pentagram's edge, illuminating the man's pale face as he crawled to your side. He grabbed hold of your leg, eyes pleading. "Thank you. I am Bishop Kieran. They captured me for my faith's betrayal. Without them, my diocese remains under dread's shadow." You gestured to Roderick, who finished the second witch with a swift stroke, her staff collapsing into dust. The last witch raised her arms, chanting a final incantation. You reached for the broken mirror shard against your belt and recalled Cartham's words. Use it not lightly. You held it high. The white glow of moonlight struck its smooth edge and burst forth as shards of reflected radiance. The fifth witch's staff exploded, a plume of black smoke rising like a curse expelled. She screamed, collapsing as her garments caught flame, draping her like funeral shrouds. As her form smoldered to ash, her howl echoed, less of agony, more of relief. The tower's hum died, leaving only the echo of Bishop Kieran's ragged breathing. He rose slowly, peering at you with gratitude tempered by pain. I owe you my life, Hunter. The church will remember this. You nodded, pressing a salve to your rib, where the blast's sting lingered. Together, you climbed the stairs to the courtyard above. The blood moon, now a waning crescent, hung low in the sky like a promise of penance. Ash drifted from the tower in gray tendrils, mingling with the night's gloom. You and Roderick guided Bishop Kieran to a small outbuilding where he collapsed onto straw, tears streaming with relief. You and Roderick emerged from the tower's shadow to find the moors bathed in moonlight, a world cleansed by sacrifice. Each swaying grass blade seemed to bow in reverence, as though acknowledging that the last witch's death released more than darkness. Yet neither you nor Roderick spoke. The enormity of this final victory stunned your tongues. You mounted Sparrow as she waited silently, willing legs pressed to flank. Roderick mounted Blackthorn, Mercy's hilt warm against his arm. Morning's pale light filtered through brittle autumn leaves, casting skeletal shadows on the road that wound from Silver Vale's convent toward Fort Dunlo. The air was still, heavy with the scent of decaying moss and distant smoke. Sparrow's hooves clopped against the damp earth as you guided her forward, Roderick at your flank on Blackthorn. Beneath your cloak, you carried the shard of the shattered mirror, its edges dulled by blood, yet still glinting with enough reflected light to stave off nightmares. Roderick, gloved hand resting lightly on Mercy's hilt, cast wary glances into the tree line, as though expecting the forest itself to rise and carry him away. The road to Fort Dunlo was known more for deserters than hunters. Legends claimed the keep had fallen long ago, its walls crumbling into ruin after a siege of unnatural winter. But recent rumors, whispered in taverns and prayer halls alike, spoke of strange lights flickering at its windows, and of villagers lost to the snow, never to return. When Bishop Kieran left to restore his diocese, he pressed these rumors upon you like a bitter swallow. Witches, or worse, necromancers, manipulating hungry spirits. Seek out the keep's truth, he had urged, voice trembling beneath his hood. If darkness festers there, let your blade cut it away. As you continued, the road narrowed into a single track, lined with brittle hedgerows that rattled like dry bones. A lone raven circled overhead, its cry tearing through morning's hush. Sparrow's flanks skittered. She reared slightly, nostrils flaring with fear. You patted her neck, murmuring a prayer you barely believed. Roderick nudged forward, whispering, "Night's end has not yet come. We remain vigil." His words settled on your shoulders, a reminder that the hunter's path never truly ended. 3 hours passed before Fort Dunlo's silhouette appeared beyond a rise, a squat keep of gray stone capped by frozen battlements. Snow dusted its parapets, though the calendar still marked autumn's close. A sense of wrongness lay in the air, like breath exhaled too long and left on still water. As you drew nearer, the outer gate, a curve of twisted iron, stood half open, creaking on its rusted hinges. Roderick dismounted cautiously, blade drawn. You loosed Sparrow's reins, letting her graze on frozen grass. Together, you passed through the gate's threshold. Inside, the courtyard lay blanketed in powdery snow. Footfalls gone faint. Splintered carts stood abandoned, wheels half buried. A few overturned barrels leaked stale ale, its sweet stink mingling with the chill. The air trembled, where each breath crystallized into frost. At the keep's heart, the main gate had been battered from within. Slabs of wood splintered like broken ribs. Through the ragged cap, Roderick and you advanced, senses straining for the unnatural. The walls rose ominous and cold, windows like black eyes watching your every step. You entered a dimly lit vestibule, where icicles dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears. In one corner, a priest's chalice lay toppled, a smear of blood clotted at its rim. You crouched to inspect. A chapter from some ritual book lay nearby, pages scrawled with curses to trap restless spirits. The writing twisted around runes you recognized as kin to those used by the sisters of the crumbling spire. A chill ran down your spine. The keep's corruption had roots deeper than anyone suspected. Roderick pressed a finger to his lips as he stepped toward a side door, swinging it open silently. Beyond lay the great hall, now a tomb of frost-bitten tapestries and half-melted candle stubs. Long rafters overhead sagged under ice's weight. At the far end, a dais bore a dais, once used by Lord Dunlo, now empty except for a gathering of flickering candles on a low table. On the table, 5 masks carved of bone stared blankly, each marked with a symbol of the cardinal sins. Greenish candlelight danced across their cracked surfaces, the masks arranged in a perfect circle. You crouched, staring at the center. Footprints in the ash-coated floor converged on a lone footprint darker than night. The pattern was clear. Someone had orchestrated a dark ceremony here, using bone and candle to tether some restless force. A sudden scurrying echoed from the hall's shadowed fringe. You backed away, arrow knocked, as 5 gaunt shapes emerged. Their flesh was pallid as winter's first frost, eyes glinting with something both longing and tortured. Beneath matted hair, faces were half-skinned, muscles exposed in grotesque display. They wore scraps of noble garments, so tattered they might have been cobwebs. You recognized their stares. They were victims of the keep's curse, souls bound to servitude. Their wails rose like a lamentation at dusk, voices cracking as they chanted, "The King of Bones, our master, demands his due." They advanced, arms outstretched, each step a hollow echo. Roderick braced himself, grasping Mercy's hilt with white-knuckled intensity. The first shadow lunged, its ragged teeth bared. You loosed an arrow into its shoulder. It collapsed into a plume of withered ash. The others shrieked and advanced, but you held your ground, unleashing 2 more arrows in quick arc. Each bolt struck true, one in the abdomen, the other in the throat. With each hit, a figure dissolved into motes of dust that drifted to the floor. When the last crept forward, you fired an arrow into its temple. It crumpled, silence returning as the final mote of dust drifted to rest. Sweat beaded on your brow despite the cold. Roderick lowered his blade, shading his eyes from the candlelight. "They were once soldiers," he said softly, "cursed to serve the necromancer who betrayed them." You nodded, kneeling to touch the floor where their bodies had fallen. The ash felt like sorrow under your fingertips. "We must find him," you replied, standing in the lingering gloom. "Before more souls are lost," Roderick agreed, sheathing mercy. "The crypt lies beneath the keep. That is where we must descend." With quiet steps, you and Roderick crossed the dais and found a trapdoor behind the throne. Roderick lifted it. It groaned as it revealed stone steps spiraling down into pitch. The air grew colder with each plunge. Your breath turned to frost as you reached a landing. Before you lay the crypt, an expanse of vaulted arches and tombs carved with names long erased by time. A green phosphorescence glowed from rot and mold clinging to the walls. You gripped arrow and blade with a sense of dread. The keep's heart lay within reach, but so did deeper horrors. Footsteps echoed, not yours, but someone descending behind. You whirled, Roderick and you, back to back, blades drawn for the unseen intruder. A robed figure emerged in the flicker of torchlight. Tall, gaunt, eyes hidden beneath a cowl, staff crowned with a skull that pulsed with sickly green light. You recognized him immediately. Master Walleran, necromancer to the Sisters of the Crumbling Spire. His lips curled into a contemptuous smile. "Hunter," he spat, voice smooth as poisoned wine. "You cannot stop what has already awakened. The King of Bones rises. He shall walk this keep tonight." He raised his staff, chanted in guttural tones that made the air throb like a wound. Roderick lunged forward, Mercy's blade clanging against Walleran's staff. But the blow rebounded as green light flared. You flung arrow after arrow, each deflected by an invisible ward. Walleran's incantation rose to a crescendo, and the sarcophagi around you rattled. The stone lids slid aside with grinding finality, revealing skeletal figures reaching for the air. You stared in horror. Dozens of skeletons, each empty eye socket aflame with green fire, emerged from their tombs. Roderick held his ground, blade raised, as you knocked another arrow. "We take him down," he roared, voice echoing like a hammer. But Walleran laughed, and the skeletal host surged forward. You leapt back, planting your boot against a slab that cracked to reveal a hollow void. Roderick slashed at the nearest skeleton, shattering its ribcage in a splash of green ichor that dribbled down his blade. The next hissed and lunged at you, skeletal claws snapping like scythes. You dodged, firing arrow that pierced its skull, sending it tumbling across the crypt floor. More rose from coffins, each moving with dreadful purpose. Walleran, standing beyond the skeletal tide, chanted faster, staff swirling as he fed power to his undead legion. You caught Roderick's eye. No words passed between you. He charged into the braying horde, blade flashing, carving through skeletons with merciless precision. You loosed arrow after arrow, but for every skeleton that fell, two rose in its place. The ancient keep trembled, as if aching under the weight of its own betrayals. Walleran raised staff, casting a wave of green flame that coruscated across the crypt floor, sending sparks into the rafters. The heat singed your cloak. You tumbled backward, chest burning. Roderick's shout drew your attention. He had driven the skeletal tide back to the crypt's entrance, holding his ground. "Find Walleran's focus," he bellowed. "Destroy it, then the host will fall." You scanned Walleran's form, spotting a silver medallion hanging at his throat, an amulet shaped like a skull circled by a serpent. You drew blade and began sprinting through the spiraling skirmish, deflecting skeletons slash with your dagger narrow as a whisper. Each breath was cold fire. You remembered Father Aldwin's blessing Cartham's prayers. Each chapter of prayer you had learned to recite in darkest hour. Now, the prayers had to be spoken on your blade's edge. The skeletons beyond Roderick surged forward, but he held them back, refusing to yield an inch. You reached Walleran, searing hatred igniting in your veins. He sneered, staff pulsing with green light that rippled through the crypt's gloom. With a roar, you plunged your dagger into the necromancer's chest, aiming for the medallion. The blade pierced flesh, and a shriek split the hushed gloom as Walleran collapsed, clutching at the amulet. You twisted, yanking the medallion free. Light flared in his eyes, then dimmed as his form crumpled into a pile of ash. At that moment, the skeletal tide froze, each figure collapsing into brittle fragments that rained to the ground in silent surrender. The crypt's hush returned, broken only by the wet crackle of ashes drifting across flagstones. You leaned on your dagger, trembling, as Roderick joined you. "It is done," he whispered, eyes red with both triumph and sorrow. But at such cost. You knelt, folding Walleran's charred remains, then cast the amulet into a pool of water leaking from a broken pipe. Green ichor sizzled into ripples, then stilled. The crypt exhaled its final breath. Roderick placed a hand on your shoulder, guiding you to stand. The crypt's ceiling above you shuddered once, then fell silent. As you ascended the spiral steps to daylight, the crisp air felt like a miracle. Sparrow and blackthorn neighed in welcome as you emerged from the keep's shadow. The morning sky was pinned with starlight, though dawn's promise glimmered on the horizon. The road home lay quiet, each footstep echoing with ghosts laid to rest. Roderick sheathed mercy, exhaling a breath that tasted of release. You gave Sparrow a gentle clap. She stamped forward, eager to leave the broken keep behind. As you rode toward Silvervale's convent, the raven from Witch's End circled overhead, its cry a final benediction. You felt exhaustion coil in your limbs, but relief bloomed in your chest. The keep's dark heart had been silenced, its victims freed. Yet, beneath victory's bright gleam, a shadow lingered, the memory of broken promises, the echo of bone-choked curses. You knew the world still teetered on edge, that new horrors waited in silent breath. But for now, the path beneath your feet was clear. Live to protect the innocent, honor the fallen, and carry the watchful flame against darkness's return. The road from Fort Dunlo to Silvervale's convent traced a ragged path through Whispering Gorge, a defile notorious for winds that carried voices of the lost. You pressed Sparrow's flank, urging her forward as you approached the gorge's mouth. Dawn's light glimmered on jagged rocks that pitched toward a churning river below. Along the narrow cliffside path, briars of thorn twisted like skeletal hands, each bramble bristling with sharp barbs. A breeze stirred, carrying hushed murmurs that sounded like pleading. You gripped bow tighter, recalling that voices could guide or betray. Roderick followed on Blackthorn, his silhouette framed by rising sun. "Stay close," he whispered. "The gorge tests the mind as much as the body." You nodded, lips pressed tight. Each step felt precarious, the path crumbling underfoot. One misstep meant a plunge into icy waters swirling far below, waters said to drown the living and trap the souls of the fallen. Today, you braved it, not for conquest, but return. The convent's sanctuary called as promise of healing bones and shattered minds. Halfway through, the gorge's narrow walls squeezed the path into near impossibility. A group of pilgrims trudged toward you, faces sunken, hoods drawn low. They carried bundles of threadbare blankets and dried bread, each footfall echoing with silent prayer. As you passed, the nearest, a woman with eyes the color of slate, raised her head and whispered, "Keeper of broken light, your burden grows. We've seen your coming, hunter." You halted, striking arrow from bow. "Who speaks?" you demanded fiercely. The woman bowed her head. Her companions followed in silence. "We speak for those who walk unseen. May your blade remain true, for darkness knows your scent." They vanished into the mist, as though exhaled by the gorge itself. Your heart pounded. Roderick exhaled a curse quietly, before steering Blackthorn forward. "Pilgrims heed no glory, only faith. Let us pass before they wander into curses." You shook off the unease as the path widened and led down a flight of stone steps carved centuries past. At bottom, the river gurgled and spat, its banks lined by bleached skulls, half buried in gravel. Each skull glowed with pale phosphorescence under moon's lingering glow. You unsheathed mercy, scanning river's opposite bank, where a solitary stone arch marked entry to a sunken ruin. Beneath the arch, flickers of torchlight danced, blocked from view by hanging vines. You nodded to Roderick, and together you forded the river's waist-deep current. Water stung exposed skin as you battled the current. Each step risked slip. Roderick took lead, planting Blackthorn's hoof carefully as he found stable footing. You watched him, trusting his stride, despite stinging cold biting at your ankles. When both mounts reached shore, you dismounted, shaking water from boots. The arch's flame wavered, shadows dancing across moss-covered stones, like twisted phantoms welcoming your arrival. Within the ruin's confines lay a circular chamber, its walls inscribed with runes that glowed faintly blue in moonlight. A stone plinth stood at center, upon which rested a single chalice of silver filigree. The chalice brimmed with water that shimmered like liquid moonlight, each ripple reflecting stars unseen. As you approached, the river's roar fell silent, an echo that swallowed all sound. Roderick caught your arm. "A bargain," he whispered. "Those who drink from the moonlit chalice can glimpse the next threat, but only at the cost of a memory." You inhaled, recalling Cartham's warning that knowledge often came steeped in agony. Before you spoke, the chamber's silent hush was broken by the arrival of an old crone, a pilgrim whose eyes blazed with reflected moon. She wore robes of midnight blue, stars embroidered upon them like promises. Flicking her wrist, her staff emerged from behind her back, a twisted branch topped with a crescent moon carved from bone. "Hunter," she croaked, "the chalice awaits your thirst. Will you trade sight for sorrow?" You hesitated, weighing your vow to defend against unknown terrors. To know the next Coven's lair meant preserving lives. To relinquish a memory meant carving something from your soul. Roderick placed a steady hand on your shoulder. "We face uncertain dawn," he said quietly. "If memory's price brings salvation, pay it." You stepped forward, eyes fixed on the chalice's weaving light. Kneeling, you dipped your trembling fingers into the liquid, cold as the grave. You drained the chalice in one gulp, letting liquid moonlight swirl down your throat. Instantly, the chamber shifted. Visions flickered behind your eyes. Fields hung with gallows. A spire of black glass rising over a charnel house, and a coven of 6 witches cloaked in fire's glow. Their leader raised a scepter, crowned with a human heart, chanting words that cracked the sky itself. You gasped, vision melting into a rash of pain. As memories surfaced, childhood laughter, your mother's lullaby, but then faded like shadows at dawn. When your vision cleared, a hollow ached in your mind. You groped for the memory of your first hunt. Its warmth had vanished, replaced by cold clarity. The old crone's eyes glowed. You have glimpsed the specter coven, their ascendancy nigh. Seek them at Raven's Reach, where blood flows like wine. But heed this, the price of knowledge is memory's shroud. She vanished in a swirl of chanting wind, leaving you and Roderick kneeling amid runic rubble. The chalice lay empty, its silver filigree dulled. You rose, staggering as if wounded. Roderick caught you, pressing a hand to your back. "Are you well?" he asked. You swallowed against the void where your memory had been. "I remember only loss," you said, voice hollow. He nodded as you both mounted your mounts. "Let us return. The convent awaits our counsel, and Raven's Reach waits its reckoning." As you retraced your steps through Whispering Gorge, the pilgrims you passed bowed in recognition. Their nods offered solace, acknowledgement of burdens shared. The river's murmur now seemed gentle, as though guiding you home. When Silvervale's spires crested the horizon, morning's first light washed away the gorge's gloom. You exhaled, but the void in your mind yawned, reminder that knowledge's price was steep. Your past melted like candles in a storm. You and Roderick entered the convent's grounds, greeted by Sister Mirabelle and Brother Cartham, who bore witness to your weary return. They guided you to the infirmary, where herbs of healing simmered, sending steam that wrapped you in a fragile cocoon of warmth. Cartham offered tea infused with mint and honey. You sipped as memory flickered and vanished. "What have you seen?" he asked softly. You met his gaze, and for a moment you recalled a mother's lullaby, just enough to taste its sweetness before it evaporated. "A coven rising at Raven's Reach," you managed. 6 witches bound to a scepter, carved from a heart. Roderick nodded grimly. Placing Mercy's hilt on the table, you collapsed into a chair, exhaustion overtaking memory and breath alike. Sister Mirabelle leaned close, her voice a soothing hymn. "Your soul bears wounds unseen, but the world waits. Rest now. Tomorrow we prepare." As she guided you to a cot, you caught the glint of moonlight on a jar of preserved herbs, remnants of the chalice's ritual. Night's black curtain fell over the convent as you and Roderick set out for Raven's Reach, an ancient watchtower atop the scarlet-hued Shipwright's Peak. Your path wound through moonlit meadows, each step stirring memories drowned by the chalice's cost. Sparrow and blackthorn trod softly on dew-laden grass, their flanks heaving with quiet determination. The wind carried whispers of unquiet spirits, voices begging for release or vengeance. You gripped the mirror shard in your palm, its edges cold as marble, promising reflection, even in utter darkness. By midnight, you reached the foothills of Shipwright's Peak. The mountain rose like a bleeding wound, its crags slick with red-tinged snow. Above, the stars glimmered like distant flames, strange comfort in their silent watch. You dismounted, fastening cloaks against the biting wind. Roderick unsheathed Mercy. Its steel gleamed under starlight. "We ascend now," he said, voice soft as a gravestone's whisper. You nodded, stealing limbs that trembled with cold and anticipation. Together, you climbed a narrow ledge carved into the mountainside. The wind howled, carrying frozen screams from unseen crevasses. At each step, rocks crumbled beneath your boots. Loose promises of sure footing. You paused at a ridge, peering down into a valley shrouded in swirling mist. Within that mist lay the vale where villagers claimed witches held their final feasts, a place where blood flowed in crimson streams. The memory of children's whispers echoed, stirring a grim vow. None would fall again. Roderick stepped forward, hand on your arm. Be vigilant, he murmured. The Cabal's power is strongest on the peak's summit. You gave a curt nod, arrow drawn. Sparrow and blackthorn grazed on scant brush, releasing steam in frozen breaths. With final glance at the valley's churning mists, you continued upward. As you neared the summit, the path narrowed into a spine of ice and stone. A thin trail of black ashes led to a shattered wooden door set in the mountain's face. Through its jagged edges, pale light flickered. Torches, braziers, or maybe wards, older than memory. You pressed forward, heart thundering like a martyr's prayer. Roderick brought up the rear, blade at the ready. At the threshold, you beheld the Coven's lair, a vast cavern carved by ancient hands, walls etched with faded runes scribbled by tongues long silent. In the cavern's center stood a stone altar, draped with a scarlet cloth stained black with old blood. Arranged around the altar, 6 witches knelt on the cold stones, their faces tilted upward toward a moonlit shaft that plunged from the mountain's crown. Each wore a circlet of woven bone, eyes glowing with lust for power. Their bodies were half veiled by tattered garments that fluttered like dark wings. Atop the altar lay a human heart, still pulsing with faint green light, an offering to power beyond reckoning. Your breath caught as one of the witches rose, her hair silver as the moon, and her eyes black as void. She stepped forward, voice lilting, as she sang words older than language itself. "Welcome, hunter. Welcome, betrayer," she cooed, "to the final feast." The others rose in unison, lifting their arms in an invocation that shook the cavern's bones. You knocked an arrow, but Roderick grabbed your arm. "Not yet. We must remain hidden until they finish." You pressed against the cavern wall, arrow aimed, teeth clenched against tremor. Roderick melted into shadow as the witches circled the altar, chanting louder, summoning forces to consume the heart. A wind rippled through the chamber, scattering ash like malevolent confetti. You felt something tighten around your heart, a cold, strangling promise that this ritual would rend the world asunder. The silver-haired witch reached beneath her cloak, drawing a blade carved from obsidian bone. Its edge shimmered with terrible hunger. She bent over the heart, raising the blade high. Roderick exhaled. "Now," he breathed. In one fluid motion, both of you sprang into action. Roderick's blade arced like a silent storm, while your arrow streaked toward the silver-haired witch's circlet. She hissed, spinning away. The arrow struck true, embedding in her temple. She staggered, clawing at the shaft as blood ran in thick rivulets. The heart's pulse stuttered. The cavern erupted into chaos. Arrows and bolts of green flame converged as witches lashed out, each sorcerer's staff blazing with ancient power. Mercy clanged against obsidian blade, sparks trailing between Roderick and the bone-wrought staff of the second witch. You loosed arrow after arrow, each one piercing through ghastly robed forms. One witch shrieked as arrow struck her in the back, dropping her into a pool of ichor that fumed beneath her. Another hurled curses that roared like thunder, nearly knocking you off your feet. You dodged, rolling, and pressed your blade into the nearest witch's side. Steel plunging into flesh, that crackled with forbidden energy. She collapsed, tears of blood trickling down her hollow cheeks. Above, the shattered door rattled as other witches from covens far and wide converged at the cavern entrance. Their arrival brought faint echoes of chanting like distant thunder. You realized this battle would either end here or consume the mountain itself. Roderick braced against a fallen pillar as Mercy glowed with moonlight's reflection. His blade cut through the fist-wreathed hands of a witch who had managed to conjure a ring of crimson flame. The blaze hissed against ice, but did not falter, licking upward like a hungry beast. Roderick rolled away, hair singed, and returned a fearsome strike that sent her tumbling. Your heart hammered as you saw the silver-haired witch claw at the altar. Her bloodied hand reached for the heart's last flicker, tongue lolling in ecstasy. If she regained it, the ritual would complete, and with it, the birth of the Spectre King, the necromantic lord destined to drown the world in shadow. You took a breath, summoned the last prayer on your soul, and leapt forward in a final gambit. Out of the corner of your eye, you spotted Roderick, driving back 2 more witches. Mercy's glow brightened, a sign that the blade recognized a decisive moment. You plunged your blade into the silver-haired witch's back, each inch of steel whispering sorrow. She gasped, the heart flickered, and her eyes widened as she realized the ritual's collapse. Roderick joined you, driving his blade into the platform that held the altar's stone. It cracked, splitting in 2 as green light flared. The heart collapsed, a final pulse of luminescence that burst across the cavern like a dying star. A thunderous roar shook the mountain as the shattered altar imploded in a wave of force that blew the witches off their feet. Each crashed against walls, then collapsed in ashen ruin. Silence fell, thick as dust. The heart's remains lay broken at your feet, shrapnel of dreams best left unwritten. Roderick stumbled forward, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. You steadied him, breath mingling as the remnants of the Coven writhed in their final death throes. Their bodies crumpled into dust that drifted on a current of stale air, ashes of pain released at last. The ravens outside cawed in triumph. You and Roderick exchanged a look that spoke of relief and exhaustion. Torchlight flared as reinforcements from Fort Dunlo arrived, their faces pale at the sight of witches' dust strewn across the cavern floor. Bishop Kieran's voice echoed down the cavern steps, a benediction for the fallen and a vow to bury the dead with dignity. You lingered at the summit's edge, staring out at the crimson moon's last embrace. The path home beckoned, a long ride back through Whispering Gorge, past Silvervale's refuge, and onward to whatever dawn awaited. Roderick placed a hand on your shoulder. "It is over," he said. "The Coven's end is at hand." You nodded, feeling the weight of every life saved and lost. The hunt had consumed your nights and claimed your memories, but it had also forged a bond between you and Roderick that no darkness could sever. As morning broke, the blood-red sky faded. Raven's Reach stood silent. Bones returned to earth, and hope rekindled in broken hearts. You turned to Roderick, whispering the vow again. "We will remain vigilant, for darkness never sleeps." He squeezed your arm and led you down the mountain spine, each step closer to home, a testament to the hunter's resolve. When you and Roderick arrived back at Silvervale Sanctuary, the first light of dawn painted the spires in gentle gold. The keep's ancient stones seemed to sigh in relief as the air warmed, carrying the scent of healing herbs and fresh hay. Sparrow and Blackthorn plodded through the gates, heads bowed in mutual exhaustion. The gateway sentries, gaunt but alert, greeted you with bowed heads. Word of the Coven's dissolution had spread, yet in each face lingered sorrow for the souls claimed by darkness. Sister Mirabelle awaited at the courtyard's center, her robes crisp as dawn's first dewdrop. She rushed forward, arms outstretched. "You return," she said, voice thick as morning mist. Roderick dismounted, shoulders slumped. You kept Mercury at your hip, feeling its weight as a final comfort. Mother Superior, her silver hair bound in braided coils, joined Sister Mirabelle. "Tell us you bring light," she said, eyes darting between you and Roderick. Roderick dipped his head. "The Coven at Raven's Reach is no more," he replied, voice raspy from exertion. "The Spectre King's birth was undone. Darkness has been driven back." Tears glistened in Mother Superior's eyes. Then the sanctuary breathes anew. She crossed herself, as though filling the air with prayer. You felt a stab of guilt, mixed with relief, knowing many had sacrificed themselves, so refugees could sleep in safe beds. Sister Mirabelle led you to the infirmary, where survivors, now healed of frostbite and fever, gathered for vespers. The orphans you saved from Bloodstone Inn now lined the pews, each clutching Marion, the scribe's book, filled with stories of hope. Among them sat the children from Blackscale Village, their faces half illuminated by candlelight. You knelt, offering a gentle blessing, as the choir's hymn reverberated through archways. After vespers, you and Roderick followed Brother Cartham to the chapel's alcove. There, a small table held the locket you carried, a tarnished silver heart bearing your mother's face on one side and the broken rune on the other. Cartham handled it reverently. You sacrifice memory to gain knowledge, yet this locket remains intact. He traced the broken rune with gentle finger. Perhaps it holds a piece of what you lost, enough to anchor you. You felt a tremor as you took it, studying its intricate design. Within the locket lay a single dried rose petal, faded but still tinged with color. You pressed it to your nose, inhaling the faint scent of your mother's garden. And for a moment, the memory you had sacrificed flickered, her voice singing as she pruned roses, sun warming her skin as she laughed. The memory slipped away, like a dream recalled too briefly. You closed the locket, heart hollowed by its absence. Cartham placed a gentle hand on your shoulder. "Grief is the price we pay for love," he said softly. "To lose memory is to lose a piece of ourselves, but what remains is still enough." You exhaled, pressing the locket into your palm, like a lifeline. Later, you and Roderick joined Sister Mirabelle in the convent's garden for mid-morning tea. The crisp air carried bird song that thrummed like a new heartbeat. On a bench carved with ancient prayers, you sat beneath a blossoming hawthorn, branches white with blossoms, each petal drifting like paper prayers onto the stone path. Sister Mirabelle poured steaming tea from a porcelain teapot painted with lilies. The tea's warmth seeped through your bones. "We will rebuild," she said, eyes gleaming. "Silver Vale will be refuge once more." Roderick sipped quietly, his reflection rippling in his teacup. You listened to the hum of new beginnings, letting your guard lower for a breath. The peace, however, was tenuous. At midday, Bishop Kieran appeared in the courtyard, clad in polished armor and surmounted by a tabard bearing Fort Dunlo's crest. He carried with him a delegation of monks, scribes, and a handful of survivors seeking solace. He approached you And Roderick, I have come to thank you, he said, folding the Covenant's scroll into your hand. Eastmarch recognizes your valor. We grant this sanctuary new protection under our watch. The scroll unfurled, bearing a wax seal of King Rowan, vows to send aid and protect the keep from future darkness. A cheer rose from the gathered crowd. You exchanged a glance with Roderick. This was hope's currency, yet still fragile as morning dew. You spent the afternoon training surviving nights in the courtyard's yard. Mercy's sparks flew as you demonstrated a parry. Roderick taught arrow drills beneath spar might. Children watched from behind barrels, mimicking moves with wooden sticks. The courtyard's walls, once battleground, echoed with laughter and the ring of steel, a hymn of life returning. As the sun began its descent, you ascended to the keep's battlements with Roderick. Before you, the horizon stretched like a canvas of possibilities, forests undulating toward distant peaks, fields bathed in amber, and the glint of rivers wending to unknown destinies. Sparrow and blackthorn grazed below, their shadows long as dusk. On Roderick's shoulder perched a raven, once messenger of sorrow, now a silent witness to peace. You drew in a breath that tasted like hope, letting it fill the hollows where fear once thrived. Roderick turned to you. Tonight, the Coven's ashes grow cold, but tomorrow's threats remain unwritten. You nodded, hand lingering on the mirror shard in your belt. Then we guard this sanctuary, and any who wander here will find protection. He sheathed mercy. And if darkness stirs, we shall be ready. The clang of the evening bell rang through the courtyard, its resonance echoing off stone. From within the keep, a mummers' festival emerged, children chasing lanterns, knights jesting, nuns singing hymns. You watched them, heart swelling and aching in equal measure, the cost of vigilance heavy, yet sweet with love's enduring flame. With Roderick by your side, you descended the battlements and walked into the glow of lanterns. Mercy's promise nestled at your hip. Sparrow's breath plumed in the twilight air. The Locket's locket at your chest, a tether to what remained. You stepped through the keep's gate, joined by laughter and song, and realized that the hunter's path, once walked alone, now wound through a sanctuary of hope. Each step forward was an act of defiance against darkness, a vow whispered beneath the moon and sealed with dawn's first light. And so, in the hush between night and day, you carried your vigil into tomorrow. Hunters shaped by sorrow, forging peace from shadow's memory, forever guarding light's fragile promise. Stars smoldered overhead as the final night's vigil began within Silver Vale's ancient walls. The convent's courtyard, once scarred by war's rage, now shimmered under countless lanterns hung from ivy-laced arches. A gentle breeze stirred the blossoms along the cloister, lending their scent, jasmine sweet with hope, to the night. You sat on a low stone bench beside Roderick, who cradled Mercy's hilt like an old friend. At your feet, Sparrow and Blackthorn rested, their breaths soft as prayer. Sister Mirabelle moved among gathered defenders, knights, clergy, and villagers, offering blessings in small slices of spiced cake baked from the keep's blossoming wheat. Each bite was a testament to resilience, a reminder that life pressed on despite darkness. She approached you and Roderick, holding out a pair of candles. Their flickering flames danced like tiny hearts beating against black. She guided your hands so flames met, wicks entwined, forging a single candle. "From the ember of your courage," she said, voice hushed, "and the bone of your resolve, this candle burns as our covenant. Light intact, even when winds howl." You and Roderick raised the flame to a tall iron brazier in the courtyard's center. A choir of monks stood behind, chanting a hymn that rippled through the night like a benediction. When your flame touched the brazier's cold metal, a single spark blossomed into a blaze that licked at the sky. The courtyard's circle of faces glowed in its light, each expression softened by hope's embrace. You exhaled, feeling tension's grip on your chest yield under warmth's gentle weight. Brother Cartham stepped forward, holding the mirror shard aloft. Its fragment reflected the brazier's fire, refracting embers into a constellation of light across ancient walls. "By this shard, once broken to reveal our foes," he intoned, "we pledge to guard this sanctuary and any who seek refuge. As the flame tonight, our resolve shall never dim." The shard's reflection danced on the faces of survivors, each tear gleaming like dew on new grass. Roderick placed a hand on your shoulder. "We have walked the blade's edge," he murmured. "We have known hunger and fury, lost brothers and sisters to darkness. Now, we stand as keepers of this flame." You nodded, heart trembling with gratitude. You had once believed your memory lost, but tonight, in every face around you, echoes of your sacrifice, laughter, tears, and quiet prayers, faded the void within. Dawn's pale promise arrived as the vigil neared its end. You and Roderick stood at the courtyard's steps, watching the first shafts of morning's light slice through the brazier's smoke. Sparrow stamped in the courtyard, seeking fresh hay. Blackthorn flicked ears at the morning birdsong. All around, the keep's defenders hung lanterns in their windows, ensuring the flame's breath would reach every corner of the fortress. Together, you realized the sanctuary's new dawn, a day of rebuilding and renewal, where scars would guide compassion rather than festering vengeance. As sunlight washed over the walls, you turned to Roderick one final time. "Our work continues," you said, voice steady with purpose. "Darkness sleeps, but never dies. We must remain its warden." He nodded, eyes bright with shared conviction. Each step you took away from the brazier felt light as air, no longer weighted by fear, but lifted by hope's fragile bloom. You walked the keep's corridor to the chapel, where Bishop Kieran awaited by the altar. He stood in golden vestments that gleamed like the sun, hands clasped in prayer. "Your deeds here will be sung in whispers and roars," he said, as you and Roderick knelt. You offered Mercy's blade and the mirror shard as tokens of service. Bishop Kieran traced the blade's edge with reverence, then placed it in a niche beneath the altar where it would watch over the chapel's hearth, a reminder of vigilance's price. He turned to the mirror shard. "This fragment, though broken, gives us reflection to see our own fears and conquer them. Here it will remain, guide for confessions and glare for lies." You felt a pang as the shard passed from you, but also a lightness, your burden shared with the sanctuary's timeless halls. You and Roderick exited the chapel into a courtyard adorned with blossoming blossoms and new stonework. Under the keep's great banners, bearing the House of Fenwick's crest, refurbished in bright embroidery, villagers set tables with crates of fresh produce, knights shared stories, and children raced through arches, laughter spilling like golden petals. You watched them, your heart swelling until you felt tears cling to your lashes. Roderick nudged you forward, Come, he said, let us join in their joy. Together, you stepped into the circle of celebration. A minstrel began to play a lively tune on a flute, its notes dancing around cobblestones. Villagers clapped in time, and you found yourself moving to the music's rhythm, though each beat carried ghosts of battles past. Roderick joined you. Together, you swayed as hearts unburdened found solace in simple merriment. At midday, a procession led by Bishop Kieran wound through the courtyard. Nuns bearing incense, knights armed with drawn swords raised high, and villagers carrying lanterns now extinguished, relics of night's final vigil. They paused beneath the brazier, now a silent sentinel in morning's light, as the bishop recited a blessing. Each candle's flame had been snuffed at dawn, leaving behind the brazier's steady glow. With each voice lifted in prayer, you felt the keep's heartbeat sync with your own, a rhythm of unity against darkness's tide. That evening, as dusk kissed the walls in rose and gold, you and Roderick ascended the battlements once more. You gazed across fields where harrowed earth would soon yield grain, forests where birds twittered in return, and distant peaks that touched clouds. The embrasure at your back held the brazier's final ember, now cool and empty. Roderick raised mercy, its edge polished smooth. Night will come again, he said, but we stand ready. You sheathed your dagger, pressing a palm to your chest, where the locket lay resting. Within its silver heart, your mother's smile glowed faintly, a memory you recaptured and let go, reborn stronger for having been lost. Under the rising moon, you traced a promise onto the crisp air. As long as this sanctuary stands, we shall be its guardians, hunters shaped by sorrow, defenders fueled by compassion. Beyond the keep's battlements, the world waited, peril woven into its dawn. But tonight, within Silver Vale's embrace, darkness had retreated. Guards patrolled the walls in pairs, lanterns lit for each gate, and children's lullabies drifted from windows like gentle spells. You and Roderick descended to join the keep's night watch, every step a testament to a hunter's oath, to guard the light, even when shadows slithered at fate's edge. And so, in the hush between day and night, as the world exhaled beneath starlight, your vigil endured, an ember of hope that flickered in winds of turmoil, unwavering. Though memories might fade and new threats arise, you remained ready to stand against the dark, shield the innocents, and carry the last ember of truth into dawn's eternal promise.